So, what will you be best remembered for? Wow. Recently I remember looking up the name of Gene Roddenberry, just very quickly, a visual of him. I needed for something that I was trying to illustrate to a broadcaster, and I went on there, and the one thing that came up, because it always has that, the best remembered for is always one line. You may have had a life of things that you did, but you're always remembered for that one thing, and his was as being the creator of Star Trek. And I realized, of course, Gene Roddenberry had so many other things that he had done. It wasn't just Star Trek, but Star Trek was one of the things that he came to be known for, and in a big way. So I realized that life is like that, very much like that. We really need to have an extraordinary resume of things that we're doing and designing and developing and creating. And I began to ask myself the question: what are people who are not creating? What are people who are not doing anything, that are sitting at home watching videos or whatever? What are those people doing? What are they doing? Do they have any kind of a life? I mean, yes, focus on creating and designing and developing and producing and negotiating and all of those amazing qualities that come with having a life, living. Don't focus on what people that are doing nothing are doing. I mean, forget that. But I keep asking myself, what is the antithesis of making things happen? What is that antithesis? What is the other side? Well, the other side is really wasting time, and they're like all qualities that we have. We are always gaining momentum or losing time, always. We're always gaining a movement forward. We're always going in the direction of creating and developing, but we're also wasting time, and it's that ratio that makes all of the difference. What I was astounded by, of course, is that we all waste time, all of us. We all have a time waste thing going on. Okay, we might not realize it, but we do. We all waste time, and that time wasting is very unusual, because sometimes we think we're doing things, but we're not. On the weekend, a close friend of mine was saying about how she spends a bit of time doing this and a bit of time doing that and a bit of time doing that, and that's great. And while we were speaking, she said something about, so how many pieces of music have you written? And I said to her, I've written more than 200 pieces. And she was astounded. She was like, whoa, 200 pieces plus, that is incredible. And of course came out the question, what about hits? Have you had any hits? And I kept saying, I've had a couple of radio hits. I've had a couple of songs that have done quite well, but not extraordinarily well. Nothing that has been like phenomenally life-changing. But what she said was really interesting. She said, well, there's 200 plus songs. That's amazing. I mean, that's, how do you find the time? That must have kept you busy, your whole life. And I said to her, no. Some of these songs take 5 minutes to write, and maybe another hour or two to actually produce, compose. What was really interesting, though, is I said to her, are you aware of the fact that some music composers in their lifetimes have produced 16,000, 20,000 tracks? And she's like, what? No way. She almost couldn't believe that. I mean, she believed it, but she couldn't almost believe it. And I looked it up, and on Wikipedia, sure as anything, the most number of compositions that have ever been produced are literally in the 40s and 50s, and sometimes even in the 60,000 mark. And that's totally unbelievable. But have a look at it. India, Middle East, yogis, etc. I mean, the amount of music that's been produced, the amount of musical tracks that have been produced by any one composer is phenomenal. So when you say 200 plus tracks, that's not amazing, And in this lifetime, you know, I've started to realize young people, and this is no criticism of young people, but in this day and age, because we've got so many distracting influences on our lives, we don't realize just how much time we are wasting. Just how much time we are wasting. In the average course of a normal lifetime, look at people like Simon Pegg, who came out of nowhere, acted in a couple of love, in a couple of comedies, not love stories, a couple of comedies. Wow, you know, he went on to work on Mission Impossible, befriended Tom Cruise, befriended J.J. Abrams because of that connection, and landed up writing Star Trek Beyond, being one of 2 writers on Star Trek Beyond. You know, he's a producer, a writer, and an actor, and has got extraordinarily important role play. You know, he's playing an important role in what's happening in life. So you have to ask yourself the question, you know, what will you be remembered for? And I don't think you can say to yourself in this time, in this present day and age, you can't say to yourself, I'll be remembered for this. It's not going to happen that way. The way it works is that you become remembered for the thing that you're not even aware you're going to be doing. You know, the thing that you've perhaps done and hasn't even become famous yet. Maybe it's a sleeper, it'll still become famous, it'll still become known. Whatever the case is, you're not always sure why you will be remembered and for what reason. So you've got to stay on that path, focus on the movement towards that end goal. In the case of a creator, in the case of a writer, a music writer, a film writer, a creator, a motion picture director, a producer, you never know the project you're going to be known for. You genuinely don't. In fact, you know, every project, you should put your absolute into it, because one of those projects will astound you with what it will do, but you don't know which one it is. When I made a film called Memoirs of a Microchipped Man, I genuinely didn't imagine that would win Best Film, and it would win Best Actor, it would win Best Writer, etc. I had no idea that was going to happen, but it didn't do commercially a lot of business. It was it was okay. You know, it didn't. We sold it, we licensed it, we did all those things. Not a big win. When I then went off and produced Dinosaur Park, I know that sounds funny because, you know, of Jurassic Park, but originally, in fact, it had already been called Dinosaur Park way before that, and it's actually about a theme park that has dinosaurs. But anyway, that's another story. It's more but that did, for television, it did quite well. In fact, it repeated a couple of times. We then went on to do what we loved, which was a superhero show called Strongmen, and Strongmen did very well for us. In fact, for 10 years solidly, it generated royalties, you know, well, good royalties. It did very, very well. The series was at the right place, in the right place, at the right time, and people came to know it. So it became very successful. Kids loved it. And so, of course, you know, we were to come back 10 years later and produce the full-length feature film, which has now been produced. But again, you know, do we continue with the franchise? Of course, we continue developing it, continue doing things with it. You know, we produced a film called How to Disappear and Never Get Found, purely because I was fascinated and intrigued about the subject of, you know, people discovering ancient technologies and how those ancient technologies had been kind of, you know, brushed under the carpet by institutions that didn't want people to realize that there had been a much higher evolved form of human being on this world. That was an idea, concept for a film. So that worked nicely. So a lot of these projects, you know, are projects. They might not have had an extraordinary amount of success, but they have allowed us to move forward to the next project and the next project. And now we're working on the provisionally titled film Outer Control, which will have a different name. And I'm finding that this is a great little project to work on. It's a super project to work on. We've got, you know, better technology, better techniques. We've learned a lot of lessons about how to make films on a bigger scale. You know, we're still using very creative and very imaginative ways of doing things. So, you know, it's a step-by-step approach. It's very much a step-by-step approach. So, what will you be remembered by? It's only going to be what it is that you are focused on, right? It's only going to be what you are focused on. So, stay focused on what it is that you are determined to make happen, and take it to the next level. You know, let's see where it goes. Life is interesting because the project you might be working on today becomes your new big and exciting project.